Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on now to a presentation called Mission Critical Big Data. This sounds really interesting. The CEO and the co-founder of WANdisco is with us today. Please give a warm round of applause to Mr. David Richards. All right, David.
Hi. Hello, everybody. I'm David. I live in, my British accent, I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called WANdisco. So just a little bit about WANdisco, first of all. I know it probably sounds like we're going to have John Travolta up here and disco balls and dancing and all the rest of it, but it's actually an acronym. It stands for Wide Area Network Distributed Computing. And I'll just give you a little bit of the history of the company, actually. We were founded in Silicon Valley back in 2005 when I met, this is a classic Silicon Valley story, I met our co-founder and chief scientist, a guy called Dr. Yoturu Alad, at a drinks party. And he gave up his job as the distributed systems architect at Sun Microsystems, PhD, IIT, and decided he was going to go off and try and solve a problem that computer science still thinks is impossible. And that problem is called active-active WAN scope replication. So the ability to have two data centers, both readable and writable at the same time. What impressed me, actually, when I met Dr. Alad in 2005 was the solution to the problem wasn't sort of two guys in a coffee pot, which is the typical Silicon Valley startup story, who get together and hack together sort of a prototype, go and get some angel financing, go and build a website, build a sales team, and then go to market. This was 20 pages of pure mathematics. So the company was founded on the back of a mathematical proof. The next interesting thing about the company is we decided that the intellectual property in the company was so valuable that we really didn't want to sell it to a venture capitalist. So virtually all the startups in the Bay Area, of course, and there's a lot of hype about it right now, go off and raise venture. We elected to not do that. So when we listed the business actually in June 2012 on the London Stock Exchange, 98% of the business was owned by the founders of the company, which I can tell you is a really good thing to do if you can do it. Shortly thereafter, we acquired a business called AltoStore. And AltoStore had in it two of the original creators, founders of Hadoop. How many people in the room actually know what Hadoop is? Wow. This could be a long presentation. So Apache Hadoop is the underlying data structure for Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, LinkedIn. It was built on the back of a white paper that was actually released by Google, which was the foundation of big data, something called Big Table. Hadoop is now used by most of the world's social media companies, and it's now breaking into the enterprise. Companies famous for this right now are Hortonworks and Cloudera and Pivotal, among others. So we acquired this business, and we applied our unique replication technology to that marketplace to create something called continuous availability for all Apache Hadoop implementations. We now have offices in the Bay Area, in the UK, in Sheffield, Chengdu, China, Tokyo, Boston, and Chennai in India. We already work with some of the world's largest companies, and you can see here John Deere. You wouldn't believe that John Deere actually have 7,500 engineers, software engineers. They make tractors, right, but they have 7,500 software engineers. So big data has got a lot of hype right now, and I guess what I'm saying here is that we're coming off the top of that hype cycle, right? The very peak where big data was going to solve the problems of world hunger, it was going to do everything known to man, and we're now moving firmly down to the trough of disillusionment. But I can tell you now, this is happening. This is happening right now. I firmly believe the last major transformational shift that we saw in the tech economy was when three-tier client server systems replaced mainframe systems. When we got Microsoft for chips on the desktop, we got middleware applications like SAP, famous in Germany here, obviously, and database applications like Oracle. Those fundamentally displaced mainframes. I remember at the time a famous quote from the CEO of DEC who said, "Why would anybody want a PC at home?" Well, DEC were subsequently were acquired by HP, of course. But nonetheless, we have to accept that there is a lot of hype around big data, and because of that, to quote Monty Python, I'm big data and so is my wife. Virtually every company that I've only been here for a day, and I was walking around some of the booths earlier, and I'm sure you'll agree that virtually every company now is a big data company. And I'm going to tell you in a second that big data is not about having a lot of data. It's a bad name, I agree, but that's not actually what this marketplace is all about. The technology is moving really quickly, and I like to say that big data years are actually dog years. Things are moving 7 times the speed of everything else in the world. And I'm highlighting this here with the Sheikh Zayed Road in Dubai in 1990. This road didn't even exist in 1970, by the way. It was literally just a desert. What do you think it looks like in 2013? It's one of the most closely conglomerated conurbations with some of the world's largest buildings, and that all happened in 13 years. Absolutely incredible. And Hadoop is doing the same thing. Hadoop in 2006, when it was first launched by Yahoo, that team of 6 people under Doug Cutting that named it after Doug's son's toy elephant, was literally just a very small piece. It was something called MapReduce. It was the ability to index the internet, take all that information, store it, and then query it incredibly quickly. Hadoop today is a lot more than that. It is an applications platform. It is a compute platform. It is not simply just a database. It's a lot more than that. Excuse me. So one of the confusing things about this market is we often think that the driving force, the creation of this seismic shift in the market, is somehow created by technology. And as technologists, we would all love to believe that. But that's not actually the case. The driving force for seismic shift in any market isn't technology. I'm afraid it's dollars. It's cash. It's money. The requirement for digital storage in the economy today is growing at a CAGR, a compounded annual growth rate, of 60%. Right? We accept that. In some industries like finance, it's going to probably grow at 300%. In other industries, it might grow at 30%. But on average, across the whole economy, data storage requirements are growing at 60%. IT budgets are not growing at 60%. In many industries, they're growing at minus numbers. That line should really go down. But on average, across the economy, they're growing at 5%. This means that you cannot use existing storage systems to solve this problem. No matter how many times those vendors may tell you that you cannot. Because we did a quick test with a US government organization in the healthcare space who want to store a colossal amount of healthcare data and information. We calculated that the cost for them to do it using existing storage arrays would cost them almost the GDP of the United States. You can't do it. So that shift, this gap, creates a massive opportunity for commoditized hardware and open source software. And if you go into the data centers of Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, you will find commoditized hardware and open source software running in their racks, in their data centers. That's how Facebook scaled to 1.4 billion users today. So what's actually happening in the enterprise? Well, 2014 was actually the year of the proof of concept. We began to hear phrases like data lakes appear, which of course is a vast array of commodity servers where organizations can simply pour the data into them. And it's interesting because the barriers to entry for adopting big data and Hadoop technology are amazingly low. In the old days, when I first got into this industry, we had to go out, create a normalized data structure, export the data, find where the data is, export it, transform it, and then load it. A data lake, you simply find where the data is, structured or unstructured, it doesn't matter, and you pour it into the data lake. and then you begin to build queries on top of it. We don't make assumptions about the data because that pollutes it. 2014, though, was the year of the POC. 2015, we are seeing the first large-scale production deployments of this stuff. I was with the CIO of one of the biggest retailers in the United States the other day, who told me that he was freeing up 20,000 square feet in his data centers by removing existing storage systems to create room so he could put Hadoop racks in there. This is happening, guys. It's happening right now. One of the big questions I get asked is, why do these deployments, why might they fail? What happens inside a company? All this sounds great, but what happens if they get stalled? And we have seen that over the past couple of years. Well, it's this attitude. Remember the Field of Dreams movie? The guy builds a baseball field in his backyard and hopes that the baseball players are going to come and play. That's what happens in companies. The IT department throws up a data lake and prays that the business are going to use it. And you know what? They might not. They don't come. So they build it, they build out this huge data lake, and then suddenly there are no use cases, there are no business users for this technology, and nothing happens. And that is what causes failure. So let's just think about some of the use cases that we've seen. One of the world's largest banks had the following question that they could not answer using their existing technology, and I still laugh about this. Are we making money in China? I mean, incredible. I mean, you'd think a bank could add up, right? But are we making, well, maybe not. Are we making money in China? Virtually all of the data to determine this was in an unstructured PDF Word document format, would you believe? They threw up a data lake, loaded it in, and 3 months later discovered that they were not making money in China. What do you think happened to the last presentation in the boardroom when they discovered that? Incredible. I was with the chief data officer of a major insurer in the United States who had the following question. A company that's been in business for 100 years, are my actuarial risk factors correct? Are the assumptions on which, the foundation stones on which my business is built, are those correct? This was a simple text query. They loaded the data into a Hadoop system. They queried it. All three were wrong. There were other factors that were greater than those. All three of the guy's top actuarial risk factors were wrong. And this is an insurance company. Can we do better at stopping credit card fraud? This is pretty obvious, right? How many times have we all been in a situation where we've been using our credit card in somewhere unusual? Like in Germany, for example, recently for me. And my credit card gets stopped because they're not sure if it's me. If my credit card and my cell phone are next to each other, apparently there's a 95% probability that it is me. If I bought an airline ticket to Germany and booked a hotel with that credit card in the United States, the chances are almost 100% that it is me, so they can do much better at credit card fraud. There are really simple solutions that Hadoop now enables. And remember that the driver for this, the technology's kind of always been there, but the cost element hasn't. The ability to do these things in a cost-efficient, cost-effective way, running on commodity hardware, open source software, simply have not been there. And then finally, from the wealth management division of one of the world's largest banks, can I wish my customers a happy birthday? I mean, apparently, if you wish your customer a happy birthday, the retention of that customer goes up by 90%. But their existing IT systems were unable to do that. Now into some use cases that I've seen personally that we've been working on. And the first one I'm really proud of. The University of California, Irvine, at the forefront of patient healthcare in the United States, part of the University of California system. They wanted to do an experiment, and one of the experiments was the internet. It was around the Internet of Things. So the Internet of Things we all think is wearable information and sensors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Actually, a heart pacemaker is a computer. And actually, a heart pacemaker is part of the Internet of Things. University of California, Irvine did a test based on wearable information, the heart pacemaker, demographic information, the patient record, in the same single Hadoop system, queried very quickly to determine if one of their patients, I almost said customers then, Freudian in the United States healthcare system, if one of their patients was going to suffer cardiac arrest 3 days before it was going to happen, they think that they can predict cardiac arrest in heart pacemaker patients 3 days before it's going to happen. This is going to affect humanity in general. This really will. They're also looking to plot sepsis. For those of you that know sepsis, we'll know, I'm sure, somebody that unfortunately has passed away in hospital because of this blood poisoning. Sepsis occurs on a J-curve. It's incredibly difficult to plot and predict sepsis because you can't query it quickly enough. Now, the University of California, Irvine, believe that they can. Now, this is one microcosm, one small hospital in a vast hospital system, but they believe that they can use this technology in order to save people's lives for the first time. A slightly more mundane example, and this really goes to the cost. I was one of our customers, one of the major banks in the world, is looking for a more complete customer intelligence. Most of the banks are looking for a 360-degree view of customers, and also risk is a major component around the regulatory fines that banks are getting right now within the financial services system. So in order to achieve all of that and to avoid all those fines, banks are having to consolidate structured and unstructured data from a wide variety of sources. The China example was one of them that I gave you earlier. The cost saving that they will see by replacing existing storage clusters are in the order of 99%. Literally, 99%. So again, I'll take you back to that previous graph. Data growing at 60%, budgets are not growing at 60%. Companies have to do something. That is the driver for this seismic shift, and we can see that in the numbers. So we know today that there are approximately 1,400 customers now subscribing to Hadoop distributions. Hortonworks, one of the vendors in this space, their customer base grew from 54 to 292 in 2014 alone, and in Q4, they grew by another 100 customers. So this is growing exponentially. Even Oracle predict that Hadoop will graduate from experimental pilots to a standard in enterprise data management. And the proof of the pudding, of course, is in the eating. Over $3 billion last year invested in Hadoop companies. So what has to happen to Hadoop for this to really find its way deep into enterprise? Well, it's really where the rubber has to meet the road, as we say in the United States. The guys that stare at screens all day, the operational tooling has got to be there. Security, of course, is a major concern for most organizations, for all organizations. And reliability. Now, WANdisco is focused on reliability. We solve the problem of active-active WAN scope replication that ensures that you can't have an outage. It's impossible to have an outage when you're trying to save patients' lives, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to leave you with this thought. I've finished 10 minutes early here, by the way. I'm going to leave you with this thought, actually, from Michael Porter, who states that twice before over the past 50 years, information technology radically reshaped competition and strategy, and we now stand at the brink of a third transformation. Remember what I said earlier, we used to have these things called mainframe computers. There are still actually 3,000 mainframe computers at various parts of the world, but people stopped buying mainframe computers. What happened? That space was disrupted by three-tier client server, and along came Microsoft on the desktop, Intel for chips, Oracle for database, SAP for middleware, and so on and so forth. Those companies were created out of that disruption. We now have the third phase of disruption. The third phase of disruption, I believe, is cloud and big data, which will fundamentally disrupt those three-tier client server systems. And as I said, back to that original graph, 60% data growth, 5% budget growth. That is the driving force for the change in this marketplace. So I'm finished. If anybody's got any questions, I'm willing to answer them. I don't speak German, so that's probably absolutely no help at all. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.